What's up, guys? MCMMA here, and today I am going to be matchmaking the middleweight division after last week's fight night, headlined by Rainier DeRitter and Brendan Allen. As you guys probably know, Brendan Allen pulled off the upset win over DeRitter, which definitely shakes up the top 5 to 10 of the division. And also, I think there's only one guy in the rankings who's booked for a fight right now, so I figured now would be a good time to kind of clear up some of that confusion and match make the top 15. All right, let's get right into it. First off, I have got an unranked fight that definitely has implications for the rankings. Gregory Robocop Rodriguez is taking on Roman Kopylov at, I believe, UFC 322. The winner of this fight is for sure getting a ranked opponent. They might even get ranked after winning this. Robocop is coming off that crazy knockout against Jack Hermanson at UFC 317, and I mean, honestly, beating Jack Hermanson is pretty much equivalent to beating a ranked fighter since he only got removed from the rankings because of inactivity. And Kopylov obviously was ranked in his last fight against Paulo Costa, but Costa kind of whooped him. So he fell out of the rankings after Joe Pyfer won against Abus Magomedov, with Pyfer entering the rankings. But these guys are both I mean, honestly, they're probably like 16 and 17 in the division. And whoever wins this one is definitely going to get not just a ranked opponent, but maybe like a top 10 opponent, especially if it's Robocop, since he would then be on a 2-fight win streak with his only loss in the last few years coming against Jared Cannonier, which is, I mean, obviously not a crazy loss since Cannonier has been a mainstay in the top 10. All right. First ranked matchup I've got is I think that number 15 Joe Pyfer should fight number 12 Roman Dolidze. Pyfer obviously is coming off his submission victory over Abus Magomedov at UFC 320. He looked pretty good in that fight. Showcased a lot more versatility in his skill set than we've seen in most of his fights, since he's been primarily a striker before this last fight. But he showed off a pretty decent ground game. Got the submission over Magomedov, who's also like a solid grappler, even though his gas tank's horrible. And then Roman Dolidze is coming off of his most recent fight against Fluffy Hernandez, in which he got absolutely bullied and fucking dominated. So he clearly needs to step down in the rankings after that one. And Pyfer, he's coming off, I think, back-to-back wins over Calvin Gastelum and what's his name? And Abus Magomedov. So it's time for him to get a little step up in the rankings as he kind of works his way towards the top 10. So I think this is a good matchup with the kind of spot that both of these guys are at in their careers. All right, next up, we have got the only ranked fighter who has been officially booked for a fight, and it's Marvin Vettori, number 14 ranked, taking on unranked Bruno Ferreira. I believe this fight is going to be on UFC 323. This is a good matchup. Marvin, obviously, he's lost his last 2 fights. Actually, he's lost his last 3, but his 2 fights this year, he's lost against Roman Dolidze and Brendan Allen. The Brendan Allen loss is looking better in retrospect now that we know Allen beat Rainier DeRitter, but still, Vettori hasn't really shown too much in his past few fights. He hasn't looked great. And Bruno Ferreira is a guy who is a very exciting fighter in the division. He's gotten a ton of huge finishes, like his spinning elbow knockout against Dustin Stoltzfus. And while he wouldn't have necessarily been my first choice to get a ranked opponent, I think he probably does deserve one. So I think this is going to be a good matchup. It makes sense on paper. I would definitely favor Bruno Ferreira in this one, just because Marvin Vettori has been looking pretty washed. But you never know. As we saw with the Paulo Costa and Roman Kopylov fight, sometimes these ranked guys who are looking like they're on their way out can kind of turn back the clock. So this should be a pretty interesting fight. All right, on to the next. I have got number 13, Paulo Costa. I think he should fight number 11, Jared Cannonier. Costa obviously kind of saved his career maybe with that super impressive win over Roman Kopylov at UFC 318. His striking looked amazing. He was really punishing Kopylov with those body kicks, and that was honestly probably his best performance, maybe even this decade, honestly, since ever since that loss in the title fight against Israel Adesanya in 2020, he really hasn't looked the same. And in his last fight, he was kind of recapturing some of that contender Paulo Costa magic. So he should definitely get a step up. I think Jared Cannonier would be a good fight. Somehow these two haven't fought each other, despite the fact that they've been in the top 10 of the division for the past like 5 years. And Cannonier is coming off his loss against MVP at UFC 319. He did get completely outclassed on the feet, but that does kind of happen to everybody who fights MVP. And he was able to take him down and control him in the third round. So I definitely don't think that Cannonier is washed, as we've seen in his past few fights before that. He obviously beat Gregory Rodriguez despite getting dropped in the first round twice. He had a pretty competitive fight against Kyle Bahayo, which he lost. It was like I think it was 48-46, since it was 2-2 going into the fifth, and then Cannonier got fucking destroyed in the fifth round. But he still put up a good fight, and then obviously in the fight before that against Nasruddin Imavov, he was arguably up before that stoppage, and it was a really bad stoppage. So Cannonier is clearly still a very competitive fighter in this division, and I think with the resurgence of Paulo Costa, this would be a great test to see where he's at. All right, next up, I think that number 10, Michael Venom Page, should fight number 9 ranked Robert Whittaker. MVP, it seems like he's going to be sticking around in the middleweight division now. He's picked up 2 wins at middleweight. The first one against Shara Bullet at the Saudi Arabia fight night, I think, earlier this year. That was headlined by Israel Adesanya and Nasruddin Imavov. And then obviously he recently beat Jared Cannonier at UFC 319. Striking looked amazing, per usual. And I think obviously he had a speed advantage at welterweight against the guys that he was fighting there, but at middleweight, that speed advantage is just going to be a lot bigger. And I know he's going to be way smaller than most of his opponents, but I don't think it'll really make too much of a difference, since even when he is the same size as his opponents, he gets dominated on the ground. So I understand why he's moving up to middleweight, since I think that the advantage it will give him in the striking department kind of outweighs the downsides in terms of grappling. But Whittaker is coming off his very close fight against Rainier de Ritter. It was a very close fight. I personally scored it for de Ritter, but you could make the argument that Whittaker won that fifth round. But he definitely looked a little diminished in that fight. You can tell he's not the same athletically as he was in his prime. He's looking a little slower. He's looking a little weaker. I mean, obviously part of that is because de Ritter is basically a light heavyweight, and he was probably like 15 to 20 pounds bigger than Whittaker that night. And I mean, Whittaker is a pretty small middleweight, but he's definitely a little diminished. I'm not going to say he's fully washed, since he still obviously has the same skill, but he just, like, the reaction time, the speed, the strength obviously isn't quite there anymore. But I do think that he could definitely win this fight if he decides to go with a pretty grappling heavy approach. We know he's not going to be able to match MVP's speed on the feet, but as we know, MVP is very easy to take down and control on the ground. So if Whittaker decided to go that route, I think he definitely could, and I think this would be a pretty interesting stylistic matchup. I know that Whittaker has been calling for a fight against Sean Strickland, but I don't think he deserves that, given that he's 1-2 in his last 3 fights. And Strickland is a guy who's coming off 2 title fight losses, so I think Strickland's probably going to fight somebody higher ranked. But I think this would be a good matchup. You could probably make this one sometime early next year, since both of these guys didn't take a ton of damage in their last fights. And yeah. Next fight I've got, I think that number 8 ranked Rainier de Ritter should fight number 7 Kyle Bahayo next. First off, I think de Ritter got dropped too far in the rankings. He got dropped 4 spots, I think it was, which is kind of crazy. I think he should definitely be ranked I think he should definitely be ranked above Kyle Bohayo since his wins are more impressive than Kaio's. I think a win over Whitaker is better than a win over Cannonier, and for both fighters, outside of those like statement wins, they don't really have too much else on their resume. But I think this would be a pretty interesting fight. Um, I think that this should probably happen a little further down the road. I don't know if Bohayo would necessarily want to wait that long, since I think DeRitter definitely needs to take some time off and kind of let his body rest and recuperate from the crazy activity that he's been keeping up since he entered the UFC. But rankings wise, I think this one makes a ton of sense. I don't think that Kaio should be fighting up in the rankings again after losing to Imavov, since if I'm going to be completely honest, he didn't deserve to get a number one contender fight off of just one win over Jared Cannonier. And I think that kind of showed in the fight. Imavov outclassed him pretty easily. I thought that he won arguably every round. I mean, you could maybe give one round to Bohayo, but he got pretty clearly outclassed. And then DeRitter, he did just lose to Brendan Allen, who was, I think, ranked like 5 spots below him, but that was on short notice. And he had a lot of steam going into that one, so I think that he does deserve to fight somebody kind of around his ranking. And I think that this one would make a lot of sense. If this fight did happen, I would probably favor Kaio, since he is a pretty good grappler. I think that in the early rounds, DeRitter would probably definitely be able to take him down and control him. But as we've seen, DeRitter's gas tank is not great. We've seen that in both of his past 2 fights. Since even in the Whitaker fight, even though he ended up winning, he was clearly very tired. And the only reason he really won is because Whitaker was just as tired, if not more tired. So I would favor Bohayo if this fight was to happen, but I think this would be a good matchup. I think it makes sense given where these guys are ranked. And yeah. All right, next up, number 6, Israel Adesanya. I think that he should either fight MVP or Paulo Costa, depending on which of these dudes wins their next fight. If they both win, I would probably favor the matchup with MVP, since he hasn't fought MVP before, and I think it would be a super interesting striking matchup stylistically. But both of these fights would make a lot of sense. Izzy's in kind of a tough spot. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. Obviously, he lost to Strickland to lose the belt. He lost the fight with DDP, which was a close fight. And then earlier this year, he got knocked out by Nasruddin Imavov. I mean, he hasn't looked too bad in these fights outside of the Strickland fight. Like, he looked pretty competitive in the DDP fight. He was looking good in the Imavov fight before he got knocked out. But kind of similar to Whitaker, his athleticism has clearly declined a good bit. The reaction time and speed isn't really there anymore. So I don't think that he's got too many fights left before he retires, to be honest. I don't really think he has anything left to prove, since I definitely don't think that he's going to get back to the belt at this point. And I mean, he's obviously already one of the greatest middleweights of all time, but it seems like he wants to keep fighting. So I think that one of MVP or Paulo Costa would make a lot of sense for his next opponent. All right, next up, I think that number 3 ranked Sean Strickland should fight number 4 Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Sean Strickland, I think, is the only guy in the entire middleweight division who's actually been calling for a fight against Fluffy. And I mean, if he wants it, it makes a lot of sense. I think that Fluffy needs one more win before he would get a title shot, and I think a top 5 opponent in Sean Strickland makes a lot of sense for him. I think that this would be a pretty interesting matchup stylistically. I would probably favor Fluffy, but I have seen a lot of fighters saying that they think that Sean Strickland would be the best or the toughest matchup for Khamzat. A lot of guys think very highly of Strickland's takedown defense and wrestling defense, and I think a fight against Fluffy would definitely prove if he could maybe be that guy to beat Khamzat or not, since I'm not going to say Fluffy and Khamzat have the same style, but they are kind of similar in the, heavy pressure wrestling style. I would compare Fluffy more like Merab, with just like the constant takedowns and just like in your face pressure. But if Strickland was able to have success against Fluffy in terms of his grappling defense, I think that would be a good sign for maybe potential success in a fight against Hamzat. But I think this would be a great matchup. I hope that they make this sometime soon, since it seems like Fluffy has recovered from the injury that forced him to pull out of the fight that he was booked against Reiner de Ritter, and I believe that Sean Strickland's suspension is either already over or it's going to be ending soon, and I'm sure he's trying to get back in there since he hasn't fought since early this year. And yeah, this matchup makes a ton of sense. Hopefully we see it probably like around the start of 2026, and yeah. Another big top 5 fight, I think that number 1 ranked former champion Dricus du Plessis should face number 5 ranked Brendan Allen. If you were to tell me a week ago that this was the fight that was probably next, I would be like, what the fuck are you smoking? Because, I mean, Brendan Allen was a guy who was being completely disregarded as a potential contender before the win over Reiner de Ritter. A lot of people thought that de Ritter was going to dismantle him. I was kind of one of them, I'm going to be honest. I did say that Allen was going to be decently competitive since he's a very skilled fighter and he's a very good grappler. But I definitely did not think that he was going to beat de Ritter, especially in the way that he did, just dominating him on the ground, forcing him to quit. But with that win, Brendan Allen is on a 2-fight win streak with wins over Vettori and de Ritter. His only he lost to Imavov and Fluffy before that, but those were both pretty close fights. And especially the Fluffy Hernandez fight, I thought that he honestly had a decent shot at winning if he hadn't made some mental errors. But du Plessis is obviously coming off that loss against Hamzat at UFC 319 for the belt. He got absolutely dominated in that fight. Like, there's really no way around it. And he definitely needs to, win a couple fights before he's back in the title picture. And I think that this one makes a lot of sense. Brendan Allen called out DDP in the post-fight interview after his win over de Ritter. And I think in terms of where these guys are both at, it makes a ton of sense. I would probably favor Dricus in this fight since I think his wrestling defense is still very good, despite the fact that Hamzat dominated him on the ground. I think the fact that Dricus didn't get submitted is a testament to how good his grappling and wrestling defense is. And I think on the feet, Dricus definitely has the advantage, especially power-wise, since Dricus hits fucking hard, as we know. But I think this matchup would be very interesting. And if Brendan Allen were to win this, it would be probably one of the quickest career turnarounds that we've seen in a very long time. And last but not least, I think that the middleweight champion Hamzat Chimaev should fight number 2 ranked Nasruddin Imavov. Imavov has been the number 1 contender. He's been the true number 1 contender for a little while now. I think ever since he beat Izzy, he was the number 1 contender. In terms of deserving the fight, he probably deserved a shot more than Hamzat, but obviously we know Hamzat's a huge star. The UFC wanted to push him to the belt, and he proved why he deserved that. Absolutely dominating Dricus, and I think that this fight would not go the same way. I think that Hamzat would submit Imavov in the first round. I don't see Hamzat losing to anybody in the division right now. The only people who could maybe slow him down a little bit, I think, would maybe be Fluffy Hernandez. He's like the only guy who I think wouldn't get submitted in the first round or two, but I think everybody else, Hamzat is just such a dominant force that he would submit everybody in the first round, or maybe if they get that far in the second round. But this is kind of a subject for another day, but I think that Hamzat, when it's all said and done, is probably going to end up being the most dominant fighter in UFC history, and against a guy like Imavov, who doesn't have elite grappling, I don't think that run of dominance is going to stop. But anyway, those are my matchups for the middleweight division after UFC Fight Night DeRitter versus Allen. If you guys agree or disagree with any of these matchups, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you think that there's a better potential matchup for some of these guys. And make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching.